Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gear Priority Podcast. My name is Justin, and I am your host. Today, we are diving deep into a tent fabric technology from the outdoor brand Nemo. You may recognize Nemo as the company behind products like the Tensor sleeping pad and Hornet series of tents. Recently, Nemo has revamped their backpacking tent lineup with a fabric called Osmo. Osmo is a nylon polyester blend with some pretty crazy stats. And I'm joined by Gabi Rosenbrien, who is the product development director at Nemo. I'm excited to pick Gabi's brain about the use of Osmo and Nemo tents and what sets Osmo tents apart from tents made exclusively with nylon and polyester. Welcome, Gabi. Where are you calling in from? Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Justin. Happy to be here. I'm calling in from the office today, which for us is in the seacoast region of New Hampshire in a little city called Dover.
Awesome. Is that where Nemo originated? Is that the same kind of main office that's been since the start, or is it moved around a bit?
No, but close by. The company was founded in a textile mill in Nashua, New Hampshire, which is an hour or so away. Since then, it's moved to Dover to a different textile mill building. And as we've kind of grown, our space has changed. So we've swapped floors a little bit, but it's a pretty cool building. High ceilings, big windows, a lot of natural light, and of course the tie back to textiles is a pretty neat through line.
Yeah, that is. And if you're not going to be working from home, it's nice to have a nice office. That's for sure. And you've been with Nemo for almost 7 years, I think, based on my internet creeping. And just curious, what roles have you been been at with Nemo over the course of that time?
Yeah, good research. So I've been on the product team with Nemo for about 7 years. I actually flagged Nemo as a brand of interest back when I was in college and managed to intern with Nemo for a summer. And at the time, they were shifting office spaces, planning to go up 2 floors or down 2 floors, I think. But because the contract was delayed, as is often the case with moves, I got a chance to actually work on some product and some prototyping instead of just helping with the move, which was really exciting for me. I came back here after college as a product developer. Before we had a robust quality and testing team. So I did a little bit of product design, a little bit of prototyping, a little bit of testing for all the categories. And as we've grown and become more sophisticated, I've gotten to focus heavily on tents, and now I'm managing all sleep categories. So sleeping pads, sleeping bags, and tents as well.
Oh, cool. So you're kind of all over the place. I've seen some videos of Nemo's testing where you guys are like dropping weights on chairs repeatedly, and I think you have a rain room for the tent testing as well. Is that in the building that you're in right now?
Yeah, it's about 50 feet away from where I'm sitting.
Oh, that's neat. That's my dream is to have my own personal rain testing room, so I can just throw tents in there and not have to plan to actually go out and camp for days in the rain. So yeah, you guys do some pretty cool testing on your products. And is that part of your job and role there as well, is to kind of develop those tests and implement them?
I'm further away from test development and running the tests now. We have a quality team and some lab techs who are really creative with building custom fixtures and running the tests. But we're absolutely involved as a product team in determining what the performance threshold should be for certain materials and what kind of interesting tests we want to run. A lot of our equipment is homemade. We've got a full wood shop down the hall. Cam, the founder and CEO of Nemo, is a master woodworker, and a lot of the furniture too in the office is homemade. So it's pretty easy to build something, learn something quickly, break something, and then try again. And I think that's what's helped us grow and learn quickly as a product team. You know, we've got all the tools at our fingertips.
Yeah, that's cool. Especially be able to have that kind of nimbleness to be able to see something, want to test it, and do that right away, as opposed to maybe even having to send something away to get tested. You can just do it right in house in the building. So that's really neat. So we're definitely going to be kind of diving in, especially with regards to the Osmo fabric, as to maybe some of the tests you guys have done to get some of the numbers around performance that we see kind of in the copy on the website, and hopefully kind of diving deeper and getting into some of the nitty gritty behind those numbers. But first, we got to start off with the rapid fire questions just to kind of get to know you a little bit better. I have four for you here today, and maybe five. Maybe I'll throw in a fifth one as well. But the first one is, what are your favorite two outdoor activities?
My favorite two outdoor activities. I'll say cycling and lately begrudgingly running.
Why begrudgingly? Are you just, is it kind of like me where when I first started getting into running or back into running, it's not a fun process. Is that kind of what you're going through right now?
Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's like I don't enjoy it until I'm fit enough to enjoy it, and most of the time I'm not, so I'm always working toward it. So
Yeah, I hear you. I can relate really strong with that. All right, the second one, what's your favorite Nemo product that you guys make?
I think the bridge into furniture was a really exciting step for Nemo because until that category launch, every piece of gear required an overnight. And don't get me wrong, I love camping, whether it's backpacking, car camping, and we have a lot of fun toys like that. But having a product like a chair that you can use after work in the backyard or at a game or at the beach, you're using it more often than you might use a tent. And I've really appreciated watching the Stargaze evolution a little bit from the sidelines, and I'll probably say the Stargaze chair is my favorite piece of gear.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a new one. I haven't had a chance to get my hands on one, but it definitely looks like an interesting product with the ability to kind of lounge and then kind of pull yourself up and sit a bit more upright, get that back support. Yeah, it's a neat design. And if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Gosh, I wish I was a rock star musician and was able to improvise and meet up with some friends and play some funky tunes after work. That'd be really cool.
Do you play an instrument? Like, are you at like kind of the not quite rock star level, but
I'm far from the not quite rock star level. I grew up playing piano. I can fumble around on a guitar a little bit, but I think just being able to meet up with musicians and improvise and jam is an ability that is sort of um, something to aspire to.
you can always bring the bucket and be the person kind of sitting on a bucket, kind of drumming away a little bit. I've done that with some pretty cool musicians on the east coast of Canada, where there's a lot of kind of just like kitchen or living room jam sessions. And I'm not musically talented in any way, but just kind of sit there and tap on a bucket, feel kind of part of the part of the event. It's neat.
There you go.
And the fourth one, what product feature is there a product feature that you've been involved with in the development process that you are most proud of?
We make a collection of small tent accessories. You know, we don't sell as many of them as the tents themselves, but we've got a collection of stakes, and uh, there's one stake in particular called a sweepstake, which we make. It's a Y-shaped stake, and when I say Y-shaped, the cross section has three prongs to it, so it kind of is sturdy in every direction, and it has a little injection molded plastic biscuit that can slide up and down the length of the stake to brush dirt away, um, and keep your stakes clean. I think most of us, when we pull out our bags of steak for a camping trip, the wet ground or mud or whatever has hardened, and you can almost turn the bag upside down and shake the grit out of it. And it's a delightful detail to use where you can extract the steak using a cord loop, sweep the grime off of the steak, and then insert into the ground during the next use. That is really clean. The steak glows in the dark. It's one of those small features that you don't think about until you're using, and brings a little bit of delight to you. And I just remember it was on a camping trip before a trade show one year, when we were camping in a particularly sandy area where we were packing up in the morning and kind of had this moment where, like, what if I didn't have to pack dirt home with me? What would that look like? So I think that's a cool, easily overlooked feature that I'm kind of proud of.
Yeah, that's a new one. I remember coming across. I'm looking at it right now online. I remember coming across that a while ago, but kind of just I think skimmed over it. But that's neat. Yeah, I can relate. I was on a trip to Arizona where the ground was really sticky, and even just like whacking the tent stakes against each other wasn't getting the dirt off. I was even like trying to scrape it out with other tent stakes. But I'd love to just be able to like slide something down 10 say, clean it off, and then not be carrying around that bag of dirt like you mentioned there. That's cool. I love those little things, the little details that someone like had a like problem when they're out in the backcountry or out camping or doing something. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna solve this, even if it's kind of just a little problem like that. Those are always super cool. That's a good one. That's neat. All right. So we're gonna jump into tents now. Done with the rapid fire questions. I'm talking about the Osmo fabric. Before we kind of get deep into the Osmo fabric, I just want to kind of establish a little bit of a baseline as to Nemo's history with tents. And starting off with kind of how long Nemo has been making tents. Has it been kind of the entire time that Nemo's been around, and how does that kind of how did tents fit into the Nemo history?
Sure. Yeah. So this certainly predates my time with the company. But Cam Brensinger, the founder and CEO, is still in the office today and still has a heavy hand in design. Um, the first commercial tents that he launched with the brand were in 2004. And it was a collection of tents that were focused on mountaineering or fast packing at the time. And as a new brand who wanted to be focused in innovation and wanted to build some credibility, Cam knew that to fight against the big players, there would have to be something truly different and really unique. And so what put us on the map was a collection of air beam supported tents. So instead of aluminum poles that, shot cord together that we're really used to, some of the tents came with a foot pump, and you inflated these beams that were made of inner tubes and sailcloth, so really sturdy things, um, in a matter of seconds. And it turned out they were really sturdy, actually. Like, unlike aluminum poles, which can bend and then break, an air beam can deform and then pop right back up. So they're really strong. They were easy to pack away because everything is soft. It's just a matter of films and fabric, so they can roll away into a shape. You're not contending with sturdy poles that get in the way. Um, and it turned out that really resonated with the industry at the time. So media outlets won a bunch of popular science, if design awards, Time magazine features, and it was like, check out this funky new brand from New Hampshire that has these air supported tents. And from there, with the shelter being kind of the staple of your sleep setup, we had the credibility to expand categories. Soon after came sleeping pads, and then soon after came sleeping bags, and here we are today, about to launch a new category in 2024.
Hmm. Oh, a new category. Well, maybe we can talk about that a little bit later at the end of the episode. If we can get some hints. Maybe if you're not allowed to reveal what it is, maybe we can get some hints at the end. Um, yeah, I think Nemo's tents have, I think, probably maybe sleeping pads now been something that Nemo's really well known for. So kind of neat to hear that things kind of started with tents. Do you know why? Like what happened to the like the inflatable tents essentially, and why that kind of got dropped?
Yeah, yeah. So they were great at getting attention, and a bunch of press picked it up, and they were super functional, but they weren't a commercial success because of the expense. As materials changed, and mills were able to make lighter fabrics, aluminum pole manufacturers were able to make pole architectures at a lower weight, it wasn't competitive to use these air beam tents anymore. They had a lot of perception to overcome. What if it pops? Even though they were super sturdy and probably more likely to break an aluminum pole than pop an air beam. Super difficult to make. Cam has a photo wall in front of me that kind of outlines the timelines of different pieces in Nemo's history, and one of them is a photo of him with 10,000 straight pins trying to work out the pattern for an air beam, which starts as a flat component, cut out of two-dimensional fabric, but by the time it's inflated, you want it to be a perfect arch. A lot of math, a lot of time, a lot of labor went into making those tents, and as a result, they were really expensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's always tough when you're fighting against cost, but it's always find it interesting too if when a company can kind of move past an initial idea. I think a lot of companies get stuck in their successes almost. So it's neat to see that kind of Nemo took their success and I was able to build off that, and not get kind of stuck there. And that I've always been impressed with the Nemo innovation and kind of looking at problems from a unique angle. And I think that says a lot to your product development team. As kind of Nemo's been making tents, I think in the past, if I'm not mistaken, they've mostly been, especially like focusing on the backpacking side of things, they've mostly been made with nylon materials in the past. Is that a correct statement? Like before Osmo? Yeah.
Yeah, traditionally Nemo and I'd say most other backpacking brands were using nylon fabrics as a base for the floor and the rain fly of the tent.
What kind of led Nemo to wanting to develop the Osmo fabric? Like what were you guys seeing with kind of the performance of the nylon tents that you wanted to address with Osmo?
Yeah, so Nemo's design mantra across all categories is to create a better adventure experience. We don't want to make the same kind of product that's already out there, including our own products. Every time we touch a product line or a certain technology, we want to be making it better. It's better for the customer, and it's more fun for us behind the scenes. And as sustainability becomes a stronger piece of the puzzle, it's better for the planet as well. So in 2022, in the development season for 2022, so this is dating back to as early as 2019, 2020, we knew that we would be overhauling our backpacking tents. And as Nemo has grown as a team, we've transitioned from a point of being really innovative at the functional level, really cool features, really cool structure, to going a level deeper and to also innovate at the material level. And that's a step that we have the privilege and the responsibility to be taking. We have the resources to take it on now. And we wanted to make the best tent fabric in the industry. That was kind of the mission. We're updating our backpacking tents. Let's make sure we have the best fabric out there. Well, best, that's kind of vague. What does that mean? There's so many ways to interpret it. Well, one, it's got to be totally functional. All right. Well, what do you need a tent fabric to do? It's got to be waterproof for sure. It's got to be strong enough to withstand wind and snow loading. It's got to be lightweight. It's got to be durable. How do you define durability? Maybe we should be thinking about building some new test protocols that we haven't done before. So you can see how this grows and grows. So one, we wanted it to be totally functional and the best out there, which means we would need to benchmark against not only what we had in the line previously as a Nemo brand, but also look to what the rest of the market is doing. The other piece that came back to the best fabric was leveling up sustainability. We have a goal as a brand to reduce our carbon intensity per product by 50% by 2030. And that's a lofty goal to have, and it requires kind of sidestepping the whole company working in sidestep to get there. It's not just the product team, that's the operations team and the sustainability team. But at the product level, the materials that we choose to use and the partners we choose to produce those materials have a big impact on that carbon intensity number, right? So we made some choices early on about the chemistries we would use or not use, and the materials themselves, the certifications we were striving for. That bundled up became a brief for Osmo. The best tent fabric meant the best performance and the best sustainability. We want to be a leader in both.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think we'll definitely be diving into both those aspects, starting off kind of with that performance piece and then jumping into the sustainability piece as well, because I think that the sustainability numbers are pretty neat and I think kind of push a lot of push the industry as far as tent fabrics go. I just want to touch on something before I'm gonna read off the numbers here from the website as far as Osmo fabric and the performance numbers. But before getting into that, I just want to touch on something you mentioned as far as being like having the capacity and being able to, from like kind of a size and influence standpoint, to be able to create the Osmo fabric. Is that because like the Osmo it's a proprietary fabric, right? Like Nemo owns the kind of the patent to it, I'm guessing.
It is a patent pending material, and we did have that particular construction exclusive to Nemo for the first year of launch. Yeah.
Okay. And the ability to actually make this fabric, is that because you're able to go to a mill and say, like, hey, we want to make this, and you're able to have the minimum kind of order for that fabric that they're willing to work with you in order to develop the Osmo fabric? Is that something that is kind of unique to a company has to be a certain size in order to be able to do that?
That's part of it. But what I'll say is even at Nemo's size, when we started working on the Osmo development, the first partners we turned to were the mills we were already using on our current tent lines. And to be honest, we couldn't find a partner who was willing to innovate with us. The typical way this can work. I was listening to the interview with Dan Durston the other day, and he was talking about how you can go to the cut and sew factory and lean on them to select your materials or give you some options for you to select, and that's certainly true. That's one option. But as you grow as a team and are able to focus on materials at a deeper level, you start to form relationships directly with the mills. And even doing the volume of tent fabric that Nemo does at our size, a big player in the specialty market, the mills that we were using in production weren't willing to try new things. It's a lot easier for them to continue to coat a lightweight 20 denier nylon with the polyurethane that they have at their mill, and no questions asked, it's doing its job. And a lot of the tents out there on the market are doing just that. We wanted to raise the bar. So we realized quickly that to achieve what we wanted to achieve, we have to find a new partner. So we looked to parallel industries, apparel, backpacks, and we started vetting new partners and said, hey, this is what we want to do. I know this is a little tangential to what your bread and butter is as a mill, but if you work with us, this is where I think we can go. And we found new partners, worked hard at it for a couple of years, and ended up with a fabric that we're really proud of. And as a result, opened the door for other brands to come to these new mills. We've made the tent fabric pie bigger for everyone.
That's good, cool, and interesting that not surprising, I guess. Like when like if a mill is making something and it's kind of, if it's not broke, why fix it? Sometimes companies can look at innovation from that perspective. So neat that you're able to find another mill that was willing to work with you and innovate. Was COVID an issue at all during that? Because I know, like you mentioned 2019 is when the process started, and next year COVID hits and supply chain issues and everything. Like I imagine that probably threw some wrenches into the mix.
Yeah, it was a pretty big wrench. in general, I can't stress enough how important it is for folks working on products to physically be there where the products are being made, where the materials are being woven and coated. Um, there's transparency that comes with that. There's trust that comes with that, and there's understanding that comes with that. But the bulk of this development, by necessity, happened remotely over COVID. And I tallied up the emails at one point and the video calls. I think it was something like 5,000 emails and 150 iterations of fabric swatches. I've got a couple binders above my desk, which are, inches and inches thick, and, multiple video calls a week. For us on the East Coast, it meant early mornings, late nights. So it was a lot of work to make it happen, and such a reward to travel again once things opened up and to see the fabric being made firsthand. A lot of it, video takes you to a certain point, and we had the transparency that we needed to feel really good about what we were working on. Uh, but doing things remotely slows things down.
Yep, definitely. Was the plan? So I think it was kind of last spring, and then over the course of the last year, maybe a little bit earlier, that kind of the entire lineup of backpacking tents has been revamped to have Osmo fabric. Was the was the plan initially to have that release sooner, and then it got pushed back a little bit with COVID, or were you guys able to hit the targets?
Yeah, we hit the targets, but those targets can change internally. We do a good job of having regular check-ins. It's about once a quarter, where the product team will report out to the rest of the company. This is where things are tracking. We might have to reset expectations here, but we were always kind of targeting the 2022, 2023 window of time to have pretty much the whole backpacking line converted.
Okay, nice. And okay, I'm gonna read off the performance specs that's on the website for the Osmo fabrics, and then I kind of like to jump into what goes into making the Osmo fabric, because I think the name is great, but I think people will be familiar with specific kind of like thread types and stuff like that, like nylon, polyester, and maybe we can get into coatings. I know if people listen to the Dan Durson podcast episode, we got a little bit into fabric coatings, so might be familiar. I think we can probably dive into that a little bit. So that these are pretty good performance specs as far as 4 times better water repellency, 3 times less stretch when wet, 20% increased tear strength, and then we have some of the sustainability items like 100% recycled yarns, and then free from PFCs, PFAs, and FRCs. And then I think something that I had to kind of look up was the industry leading hydrolytic resistance. And maybe we can touch on that just for a second, just to make sure that I'm um, getting the definition of this right. Is that mostly talking about the coatings, like whether it's like a silicone coating or a polyurethane or polyethyl urethane coating, and the hydrolysis that people see with tents and the peeling. Like I think when we look back 10 years ago and you see the seam sealing kind of peeling off of your tent, that's hydrolysis, and this is talking about the resistance of that.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, if you have a backpack or a tent that's maybe a decade old and you pull it out and it's sticky and maybe it smells bad and it is flaking off, that is hydrolysis, which is the breakdown of a compound in the presence of water, which is why you should always store your tent perfectly dry. Um, but it's referring specifically to the polyurethanes, which are the most susceptible to hydrolysis.
Okay, so let's jump maybe into the components of Osmo. Are you able to loosely kind of describe what the Osmo fabric is made out of?
Sure. So we market Osmo as a composite weave. That means it's a combination of nylon and polyester at its core. Now, remember that the tent fabric is not just a fabric. You're not just talking about the yarns that comprise it. It's a sandwich, right? You've got a combinations of coatings. Sometimes you can have films in there working with the fabric to get the performance you need. So you lean on the fabric portion of that material package for strength, for durability, for dimensional stability, how much it stretches, that sort of thing. And you lean on the coatings because a fabric alone isn't waterproof, for instance. You need some kind of sealant, some physical barrier that can do a better job of protecting from water, from being water repellent. Um, Being able to adhere seam tape requires a certain coating. So you use different elements of that package for different functions. The interesting thing about lightweight fabrics, so I'm talking at the maybe 50 grams per square meter GSM and below, the coatings have an outsized impact on the physical performance of that fabric. You can have a certain fabric with a tear strength uncoated. When you apply a coating or a combination of coatings, that can get cut in half or that can double and triple. So it comes a lot more down to how the coating is applied, what the coating chemistries are, what the quality controls are at the factory for making sure that you have consistent performance, whether it's on one side of the fabric roll, the other side of the fabric roll, beginning of production, end of production. So it's a combination of all those factors that get the 10 fabric you need.
And so with that sandwich, what are we looking at with the Osmo fabric as far as like, I think we can like we have that outer coating, and then we have kind of the fabric in the middle, and then usually an inner coating. Is that how the Osmo fabric is created as well? And like, what are those different layers?
Yeah. So there is a coating on the face. There's and I should say that fabrics have a face and a back. The face of the fabric is the side that faces the elements. So on the rain fly, it's the side that is facing the rain. On the floor, the face of the fabric is the side that's touching the ground. Um, that's where you want your water repellency, and we achieve that through a coating, a knife coating at the mill. And on the back side of the fabric, so the side facing the user inside the tent, it's where you get a lot of your waterproofness, which means how much water pressure does it take to actually penetrate the layers of that material. There's no material that's truly waterproof. They're all waterproof to a point, right? You'll see on manufacturers' websites, sometimes on rain jackets, sometimes on tents as well. You'll have a waterproof rating of maybe it's 1,500 millimeters, maybe it's 10,000 millimeters. That can all be translated back to a pressure of water required to get through all layers of that material.
Okay, and we're kind of, I think the different kind of coating technologies that I'm familiar are silicone, polyurethane, and I think ethyl urethane, or ether urethane. Uh, is is it a combination of those three, or two of those three that are being used in the Osmo fabric? And if so, where are they in the sandwich?
Yeah, it is a combination. Polyurethanes, I'm not a chemist, this is my disclaimer, but whether your polyurethane is polyether based or polyester based can affect how resistant to hydrolysis that coating is. So they're both polyurethanes, they're both PUs for short, but that chemistry is really important. And not all PUs and not all PEUs are created equal. So there was a lot of trial and error to land on the exact chemical that was giving us the performance we needed. And I won't reveal too much of the secret sauce, but it requires being careful about layering. So just because there's a coating on one side doesn't mean that coating was applied all at once. It can be stacking and curing and making sure things are done at the right speeds, the right temperatures, or the right amount of tension. All of these things stack up to get the performance you need. We do use silicones. We do use urethanes, and the base yarns are fully recycled polyester and fully recycled nylon.
Yeah, so sounds like it's a combination of a bunch of different things that took quite a bit of tweaking. I think you said 150 plus iterations, of probably different combinations of fabrics and coatings, and and everything. And it's interesting to hear that someone kind of talked about how the coatings were such a large factor, because I think that's something that a lot of people out there probably aren't as familiar with, maybe getting more familiar now, and hopefully with the podcast are kind of shining a light more on the importance of coatings in with tent material. Uh, Diving into the the kind of the middle of the sandwich with that fabric and the nylon polyester, do you have a percentage of what is like how much percentage of polyester versus how much percentage of nylon, and then what the kind of the denier of the threads are that's being used in there?
Yeah. So we talk about the Osmo fabric as a family. It's not one particular fabric. Um, we have different versions of the Osmo fabric on different tents. So the Hornet, the lightest weight tent in our collection, has one version of the Osmo, and the Dagger, which is kind of the largest, most car camping friendly version of the backpacking tents, with a different version. But they're all tied together by a few attributes, and those attributes are sort of what you're listed. It's a combination of nylon and polyester to reap the benefits of both materials. They're all PFAS free. They're all made from recycled yarns and that sort of thing. And as a result, the exact percentage of polyester to nylon changes based on the fabric. But it can be about up to 50%, like around 50-50, and then down to maybe 70% nylon, 30% polyester. So somewhere in that range.
Yeah, neat. And maybe we can kind of take that sandwich information and maybe you can touch on how what part of that is applying to these improvements in technology. Before we get into that, maybe we can talk about what those numbers are being compared to, as far as like the 4 times better water repellency, 3 times less stretch, and 20% increased tear strength. Is that against Nemo's kind of previous tent fabrics for like the Dagger and Hornet, or is that against other brands' tent fabrics?
We for sure wanted to compare it against ourselves, but we also know who our competitors are and what's doing really well in the market, what customers are responding well to, and we didn't want to just look at ourselves, right? We wanted to make sure we were going in eyes open. So I actually just flipped back into our data this morning. We benchmarked against 15 total fabrics. Some of those were Nemo fabrics, some of them were competitor fabrics. And to make those claims, we looked at averages. So any particular fabric, say we were making a fabric that was around 40 GSM, 40 grams per square meter. We looked at other fabrics that were around 40 GSM. I think we maybe gave ourselves a plus or minus 3 GSM tolerance, and then looked at how much they're stretching using our method, looking at tear strength using our method, abrasion resistance, water repellency. And that's how we generated the claims. So it was based on an average of everything in the same weight class.
Okay, that's good to know. Especially, I think it's important to be comparing apples to apples. So it's not like you're out there comparing probably the fabric from like the Dagger to maybe like a much like a Hornet equivalent tent out there, and the fabric that's there. So that's good to know. And were most of the fabrics that you're comparing to not nylon tents made from nylon, or were there like some polyesters thrown in there as well?
Mostly nylon.
Mostly nylon. Okay. And jumping into kind of how the Osmo fabric is affecting these numbers for the 4 times better water repellency, like what's contributing to that with the fabric design?
Yeah. So the water repellency, we actually looked at a couple different water repellency standards. One of the typical methods involves trapping the fabric in a ring, um, almost like an embroidery ring or something, and spraying it with water for a certain amount of time under a shower head. And at the lab, we performed this at third party labs and also validated it at our own lab. The ring is tapped for a certain amount of time on a surface, and then the beads of water are evaluated. And it's sort of this visual check of how many water beads you have, what's the size of the water beads, and what is the shape of the beading. And there's a lot of science behind surface tension and what the contact angle of the bead of water against the fabric is, but it all translates to a degree of water repellency. And that can range from 100, meaning there's no water on the surface, this is totally water repellent, all the way down to 50, which is a wetted out, saturated piece of fabric. That test can be performed at different stages of the fabric's weathering. So initially, when you receive it from the mill, your new tent, how is it going to perform? But then you can put the fabric through wash cycles, and that simulates use over time. So take the fabric, wash it with detergent for a certain amount of time. We have a 3-wash standard, a 5-wash standard, and then a 10-wash standard. So we can sort of see this line graph of how the water repellency rating changes over time, initial all the way down to 10 washes. And looking at that chart for the Osmo fabrics, as well as the 15 competitors that we looked at, you can see how we trend over time. And that's where those claims came from.
Okay. And is that mostly the outer coating that's affecting that water repellency then? Or is that the fabric as well? Is that playing into that?
Yeah, they're both playing a role. Part of the mission with Osmo, incorporating some degree of polyester, which is more naturally hydrophobic than nylon, is letting the fabric do more so the coating can do less. But because the coating is by and large what's contacting the water that your tent is going to see, most of the water repellency is coming from the finish. And that can come from a night-coated resin, as it is in our case, or it can come from a water repellent treatment, a DWR, a C0 DWR. So it's a combination of the yarns and the coating, but the coating generally does most of the heavy lifting.
Okay. And so there's no like DWR treatment being applied to the Osmo fabric?
No PFAS DWR. Like I said, it's a collection, so it's different per style. But when we do use DWRs, they're PFAS free.
Okay. And then the 3 times less stretch when wet. I'm gonna guess that a lot of that comes from the polyester being incorporated into the fabric.
Yeah, spot on. And that was one of the biggest opportunities to affect performance and perception that we saw. I think most of us who have spent a weekend in the woods have had the experience of like waking up to a tent full of condensation, or maybe it's after a storm and your whole tent has just been droopy. And then to get in and out of the tent, the fabric is loose and it's, transferring water onto your body, and it's not pleasant. Not to mention, as the fabric loses tension, you don't have as much wind performance. It becomes less of a stable structure. So we wanted our tents to perform well, to look good, to give the customer a great experience. And we knew that the more polyester we incorporated, the more stable we can make that base fabric.
Interesting. And then for the third one here with increased tear strength, what's contributing to that factor? Because the kind of general information out there is that nylon is stronger than polyester. So people might be thinking that by increasing the percentage of polyester, you'd actually be decreasing the strength of the fabric. But you guys have 20% increased tear strength. So what's contributing to that?
Yeah. Back to, it's not just about the textile, it's about the combination of the textile and the coatings. We are gaining a lot of the strength for the nylon. It's true. That's why we chose to make a composite fabric, to leverage the benefits of both. I kind of come back to like describing jeans. Like a lot of your jeans are not 100% cotton. They might have a degree of polyester, a degree of spandex in there to make them a little stretchy. A composite weave isn't a new thing. It's used in apparel all the time, but the application of it on a tent fabric for these performance benefits is novel. So we want to use the nylon because it keeps the tent strong. We want to be careful about the coating combination to deliver the strength improvements, but we also want to incorporate polyester to make sure that it has better UV resistance, low stretch, everything that comes with polyester.
what is giving that 20% bump then? Is that the coating that's helping with that then?
Yes, the coating plays a big factor, especially on lightweight fabrics.
Yeah, because I've heard like silicone can like if silicone is being applied to a fabric, it can significantly increase the strength of the fabric relative to something that may be treated with like a PU or just DWR treatment on there. And
Yeah. Yep.
curiously, with these fabrics, this guy just popped into my mind, so it's kind of out of the blue question, but when you're doing your research, like Dyneema's kind of a hot topic when it comes to increasing the strength of fabrics. And what kind of got me thinking about this was that you were going to kind of a non-tent manufacturer, like mill, in order to source fabrics, and a lot of like backpacks and stuff will incorporate strands of Dyneema in order to increase the strength and tear resistance. Was that something that you guys looked at for the tent fabric, or was it kind of something that you were able to write off pretty quickly from like a cost perspective?
Yeah, we go into every project with open minds for sure. We've looked at Dyneema in the past. We've come close to launching products with Dyneema, believe it or not. But for this application, we struggled to find a commercial place for it. The more we incorporated the expensive yarns, and we knew that with precise controls of the yarn selection, the weave structure, how dense the weave is, and the control of the coating, we'd still be able to boost our specs over what we're using in line today. And if what we're using in line today is meeting expectations, and we can come to market with something that is price competitive and exceeds our current expectations, let's start there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially, I think I'm always a fan of keeping things relatively affordable as well. And I think Dyneema a lot of the time pushes things outside of that realm for a lot of people. So that's I like that. I like that decision making. We don't need another like $2,000 tent on the market. Um, I want to jump into kind of shift over to the sustainability aspects of Osmo, because I think you had mentioned that it's something that Nemo's proud of with this, and there's a lot of great stats as far as being able to use 100% recycled yarns, which is something like if you look back, maybe we can talk about this a little bit more, but you look back, it probably wasn't even in the cards several years ago. And then the lack of chemicals, and then the hydrolysis resistance. Let's start off with those yarns. Was that something that in 2019 was doable, or at what point has being able to use 100% recycled yarns been something that companies are able to, like Nemo, able to do with a fabric?
Yeah, this is one of the benefits of leveraging our size and a greater degree of sophistication on the supply chain side. You can take a single product and spec whatever yarns you want in there. Companies are going to sell you recycled polyester if you want recycled polyester, but you might end up with a fabric that's twice the cost. And in order to make that healthy, you have to charge more for the product, right? Um, Behind the curtain a little bit, in 2019, we had maybe 25 unique coated waterproof fabrics on our tent line between our mountaineering tents, the lightest tents that we made. Um, we had so many different combinations, and the mill changed depending on where the tent was sewn. And sometimes we had a direct relationship with that mill, sometimes we didn't. And we kind of reframed the problem as, what if we reduced those 25 unique fabrics down to just 3? Could we find the right partner? Could we launch something innovative? Could we use more expensive but more sustainable materials and leverage economies of scale and purchase them for a price that's just as competitive as the virgin one-off yarns we were using around? Turns out we could. Um, and that took a lot of thinking, consolidation, line management, negotiation with the mill to get them on board. but we're really proud that we were able to pull it off. So from the get-go, we limited ourselves to only looking at GRS 100% recycled yarns. Um, how we were going to afford to do that? Well, we had 2 years to figure it out. We knew we wanted to avoid PFAS and fire retardant chemicals, as you mentioned. We were striving for certifications like Blue Sign. We hadn't been through that process on a tent fabric before. So some of this was new to even us. But through the months and months of development, we tackled one problem at a time and overcame a lot of challenges with, mills who seemed to be promising in the beginning fell off. We had, supply chain issues throughout the world, especially during COVID, was kind of the common theme. But not only were we not able to access some of the yarns we were planning on, we had a warehouse of yarns actually burn in a fire, and we had to pivot. So development's messy. You have an idea of where you want to land, and you have confidence that you'll get there, and you stay sort of stubborn to the goals that you set out in the beginning. And in this case, we're proud to say that we were able to achieve them.
Yes. And is there within the industry, is there much communication between different brands as far as like, let's try and figure this process out and push mills towards producing more recycled fabrics with more recycled materials and working on like the entire supply chain of getting those materials, recycling them, and then putting them into products that aren't necessarily compromising on performance features or performance specs?
Yeah, I think it does happen. For tent fabric specifically, we saw an opportunity to be sort of the first through the gate, and invite others to come with us. A Blue Sign approved tent fabric. I don't want to. I don't know this for certain, but I don't think there was a Blue Sign backpacking tent fabric on the market. At least not with the mills we were working with. So we wanted to find a partner who could deliver that. And now that we did, we've got other brands developing tent fabrics with the same mills that we launched Osmo with, which is awesome for us. We didn't want, full exclusivity on this technology, or a more responsible partner who is transparent and great to work with and aligned with our values. We want to welcome the industry to come with us. So we're happy to collaborate as much as we can. I think, brands in the industry are sort of frenemies at worst.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the DAC pole partnership, that was a Nemo initiative and partnership, right? In order to reduce the packaging around poles that is kind of rolled out further across the industry.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. We did an experiment with DAC, who is, one of the most premium aluminum tent pole manufacturers based in Korea, where we shipped cartons of Dagger 2P pole sets internationally, some with poly bags as protection, some without any protection at all. And we evaluated them after, these international shipments for marring, for scuffing, for damage. And what we found was there was no downside other than, or no downside at all to removing the poly bag from the process. And in fact, if we partnered with a cut and sew factory in Korea to make fabric pole bags, we could actually eliminate a step of the process for our final tent assembler. We learned this, we shared it with DAC. I said, hey, we don't think these poly bags are necessary. And they made a rolling change, I think starting in 2021, to just remove poly bags for all their customers. So it's like, when we learn something that takes us forward as an industry, that's the kind of thing we want to be sharing. There's no competitive advantage to keeping that secret.
I loved that example, and I think it's really neat to kind of just. I think it highlights that you can look at something with a fresh set of eyes and be like, is this necessary, or is it just something that we've been doing and the industry's been doing for years, and it's just kind of the norm? And I think it's neat to kind of push that, especially then to be able to test it and bring it back to the companies. And it'd probably be a little bit tougher to say, hey, we think that it might, we might not need poly bags, but to be able to test it and show it it's kind of you're irrefutable at that point. So that's neat. I wanted to jump back to the Osmo fabric. I'm curious if with the improvements to sustainability and with the like 100% recycled yarn and then reducing chemical impact and fossil fuel use, are there trade-offs to performance or price that need to happen in order to achieve those sustainability goals? And even if it's kind of marginal but acceptable, I guess, like if there's a trade-off where we can use 100% recycled yarns, but then maybe instead of 25% tear strength improvement, we're only seeing 20%. Were you able to test that and see any sort of drawback in that sense?
Yeah, definitely. We were able to test it, and we tested it at every stage. Before we even looked at coatings, we looked at the base fabric alone, even the yarns in some cases. Not all recycled polyester yarns are created equal. There's a lot that goes into the shape of that cross section. How many filaments per yarn? So like how many individual strands of polyester comprise that yarn? How is it twisted or tangled, or maybe even not? What's the density of the weave? So many factors go into just coming up with that fabric before you even start to think about coating. And I think because we looked at it as a step-by-step development, and we were willing to accept any performance compromise, we set ourselves up for success. Any issues we caught early on, we addressed. We tried something new until we were seeing improvement. So from a performance standpoint, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the metrics that we advertise in terms of water repellency and tear strength. There's no hesitation that using the recycled polyester and nylon compromised performance. Price is a different story. You know, the demand for polyester and nylon in recycled forms is shifting, and some of that is out of our hands. The prices of the yarns are going to change at the whim of the market. And right now, if you want a recycled equivalent and you want a blue sign version, or that's a version that takes a certain type of dye, you're going to pay a premium for it. So the challenge became, well, if we know the raw material price is going to be higher, and we're looking at it at a product view, maybe we don't need to look at it at a product view. We've got to zoom out. We look at our entire line. We make commitments. We work closely with the mill to make sure we have a clear picture of how much resin we're going to consume, over the next few years, and come up with a solution that's higher performing and recycled for a price that matches the virgin alternative.
Interesting. So it came down to taking a different perspective look at it to make sure that you're able to keep the prices kind of at a relatively equivalent level to the potentially less sustainable products out there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's back to that, reducing those 25 fabrics down to 3. Higher volumes, you can get a lower price. It's like shopping for groceries at BJ's. So when you get a 36 pack of toilet paper, you'll probably get them for a cheaper price per roll than just going to your normal grocery store and getting a pack of 10.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think that's an aspect of kind of product development that I think I haven't discussed much. So it's interesting to kind of hear that perspective of we're able to change the cost of the product by adjusting our supply chain and like kind of like SKU number, but not necessarily as far as just the fabrics that are being used. That's good to know. And I like that kind of out of the box thinking as far as being able to come at the problem from that perspective. With the Osmo fabric and sustainability, is there kind of like a next step with sustainability for Nemo when it comes to tent fabrics? And there aspects of sustainability you you think that there's gaps that can be addressed in the future with tent fabrics?
Yeah. Um, so I hinted earlier, the big brand mission that we're all working toward is reducing the carbon emissions per product in half by 2030. And part of that, but certainly not all of that, can come from introducing, more recycled content into our product line. That's not it at all. It doesn't end there. It's thinking larger, collaborating with other brands. We're working with other brand partners, for example, to install solar panels on the roofs of some of our factories. And it's not telling a factory that, hey, we're only going to work with you if you install solar panels on your roof. It's us financially investing and saying, hey, we believe in this too. We're partners here. Um, the energy that powers these mills and the machines and all the equipment contributes a lot more to Nemo's carbon footprint than keeping the lights on here in New Hampshire. So that's really important to us. We just published our first annual sustainability report that can speak more to other steps we're taking across the brand, but reducing carbon intensity is high on the list. From a product standpoint, we're always going to be innovating. So what's the next step from Osmo? Do we want to continue to boost tear strength? Do we want to continue to boost water repellency? Do we want to just extend the usable life of the product? When we think about our tent defect rate right now, what's the number one reason tents are returned? It's either because the zipper failed or because seam tape has started to peel off of the coatings. Those are both problems that we need to address. Uh, so looking at new technologies, partnering with suppliers to be able to apply seam tape to silicone, for instance, definitely helps.
Is that something that is that possible now, or is that something that you're kind of working with the factories to get? Is because I've heard that you basically just can't put seam tape on silicone infused fabrics.
Yeah, nothing sticks to silicone. There isn't a product out there that's commercially viable that I've seen yet. Um, you know, is seam tape even necessary? How else can you join two pieces of fabric together without punching a bunch of needle holes in it? Um, these are all questions that are on our mind, and extending the usable life of the tent is high up there too. The other big push that we're working toward is designing for recyclability at end of life. We just launched a sleeping bag called Forte under our Endless Promise program, which means we take full responsibility for the materials used on that product essentially forever. So we want the sleeping bag to go to a good home and get used, but if it needs to be repaired, how can we set up a cycle that allows it to be repaired and returned to a customer, or maybe change hands, can be resold to a different customer? Eventually, gear wears out. We get that. It might be years from now, but what do you do when you have a sleeping bag that's no longer usable? Well, we've partnered with a recycling partner here in the States that can convert that single polymer sleeping bag, the whole thing's made out of polyester, and be recycled just like a polyester plastic water bottle is, and converted back into yarn. So putting all those pieces together for full circularity is high on the list, and it's easier to do for some products than others. A sleeping bag isn't that different from a jacket or something, which is why you see some fully recyclable apparel out there. But when you start thinking about waterproof materials, or materials that need to hold air, like on a sleeping bag, the material package is a little different, and finding the right recycling partners and material changes is a little more difficult to sort out, but I'd expect that to be a problem we're working toward as well.
Okay, nice. So it's kind of a twofold thing, working on that upstream before the user kind of gets the product during the manufacturing process, shipping process, making sure that the impact is as low as possible through those steps, which I think from what I've heard is a large part of like if you were measuring environmental impact, a lot of it happens at that stage. But then once you get down to once the user has it and what happens to that product afterwards, making sure that that is all happening in a sustainable way that that is beneficial to the environment. It's I think something that I see as a big benefit of kind of current technologies and what we see with products is they are lasting a long time. Like you look at hydrolysis with tents back in the day, that was kind of just a given. That was just always gonna kind of happen at some point. Whereas these days, tents seem to be manufactured in a way that they last quite a bit longer. So hopefully we see that kind of as a benefit for the environment as well. You kind of mentioned a little bit where you see tent innovation going in the future, and continued fabric design and innovation. Is there anything else? Is you mentioned zippers being a number one failure point. Is Nemo going to move towards, you see on some tents with kind of the dual zipper, straight line zipper systems? Is that something that might be coming down the pipe?
Yeah, and I'd say our designs are suited for that particular end use. So, where you're designing for the absolute minimalist and they only demand one slider because two sliders is two grams too many. It's pretty hard to make a zipper without a curve on it. But for a tent that's going to only be transported by car and what you want to live on and maybe pass from generation to generation, why not use a burly number 10 zipper and keep the line straight? It just sort of varies based on use. And we have a good feedback loop set up with our warranty and customer service team. So if we see repeat issues in the field, we can address them the next time the product is updated.
Yeah, makes sense. And you'd mentioned a new product line. Are you able to hint at that, or let the audience know what might be coming down the pipe? Are you guys going to be at Outdoor Retailer in June and doing a full announcement then?
So we're not going to be showing at Outdoor Retailer, but at some of the other shows this summer, we will be. I'm not sure when you plan to launch the podcast, and I might have to check with Kate on what's okay. But we do have a new category coming around carry systems.
Oh, interesting.
It's a launch that has been 3 years in the making, and we're really excited, not just because they feel great and they're super durable, useful, feature-rich packs, but because of the circularity story behind them. I mentioned the Endless Promise program we're launching with a sleeping bag this year. Well, we have fully recyclable backpack coming, which should be a game changer.
Yeah. Is there a specific part of a backpack that was kind of like a part that wasn't recyclable in the past that you had to change up in order to make it a recyclable product to have that full circularity?
Yeah, definitely. When you look at a typical backpack, there might be 15, 20 unique materials on there. We leaned in on polyester as our material just because there are recycling streams set up for polyester today. But that means no spandex to make a really stretchy water bottle pocket. That means no foams to make a cushioned back panel or shoulder straps. That means thinking in a new way about the hardware that we're using, the cord that we're using. There's so many different materials that we take for granted and are sort of optimized for use and for cost in some cases. And this has sort of forced us to think in a new way about, well, how else can we achieve cushion and adjustability and all of these things that the customer demands, but in a way that won't compromise and hopefully even improves the performance of the product.
Yeah, that's interesting. That must have been an awesome project to work on, like to have to introduce that constraint, which is a constraint that benefits like the environment, the world, but then also just makes the entire design process that much more interesting and kind of next level is. But that must have been pretty cool to have developing.
It was an interesting project to watch from the sidelines. I was not leading that one, but it was so tough. One of the toughest product launches I think we've been through, with a lot of innovative material development behind it. So I'm excited for you to check out what the program is all about and get all the listeners on board too.
Yeah, definitely. Probably have to have someone from Nemo on to talk about that pack when it comes out. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on and getting nerdy about Osmo Fabric and talking about the development process for it and everything that's gone into it. I've had it out with the Dragonfly tent, and it's been a great fabric. Definitely, I wasn't sure if it was going to perform as well as I thought it was, like as well as advertised, with kind of the sagability and stretch and um, water resistance and everything, but it surprised me and was performing just as well as kind of the pure polyester fabrics that I've used in the past, as far as that stretch and um, water absorbency. So that was kind of neat to see that you can have like a hybrid fabric that takes the best of both worlds and puts them into a tent. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you spending the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Justin.